This week, the Australian Capital Territory made history as the first jurisdiction in Australia to raise the age of criminal responsibility to 14. It's a very different approach here in the Northern Territory and in Queensland, with an increasingly punitive approach to youth justice. In the NT, where the age of criminal responsibility was lowered to 10 last year, the government's law reforms are impacting the number of youths being held in prison and what happens to them when they face court. Our court reporter, Olivana Lathouris, has been taking a deep dive into this topic and joins me now. Ollie, we hear a lot about youth crime, but we don't get to get a bit of a picture of these young people. Why is that?
Well, Kyle, there's a lot of restrictions about what media can and can't report on when it comes to young people going through the court system. And the main one is that we're not allowed to identify individual young people going through youth justice courts. So that might go some way to explaining why the community might hear about instances allegedly involving a young person, but then they may not hear about what happens to them going through the courts.
And you've been closely observing the youth justice court this week. What can you tell us about it?
Carl, so as I mentioned, because we can't identify those young people, like you said, we don't have a picture of who these young people are that are going through the court system. And so to paint a bit of a picture, and this is based partly on data, but it certainly aligns with what I observed, predominantly these young people are Aboriginal men, children aged somewhere between 10 and 17. Most of them who appear in court from custody are on remand, so they're not serving sentences, they're waiting for their matters to be dealt with. Sadly, they're often victims in their own right. They may have been exposed to domestic and family violence, substance abuse. They might be in the care of the Department of Children and Families, or they might have had contact with the child protection system. So a very vulnerable group of young people. And the other thing is just the volume of matters going through the court, the demand on the court every single day to get through an extraordinary number of matters. And there's data to support that too. More than 18,000 listings across youth justice courts in the Northern Territory last year. So unsurprising that when you sit in there for a few days, you really see how much pressure the court's under.
And aside from lowering the age of criminal responsibility, the NT government's made a number of other changes, including changes to bail laws, which have made it harder for adults and young people to get bail. Is that something that you observed?
Yes, certainly. There were quite a number of instances where a young person who might have been charged with a serious or potentially violent offence was seeking bail, and that was knocked back because the court just couldn't be convinced that there wasn't going to be either a risk to community safety or that young person wasn't at risk of going out and offending again. And that is an example of the most recent bail reforms by the government in action. And those bail reforms are really just one factor in this confluence of things that are coming together for the courts right now. There's this huge volume of matters coming before the court. You've got procedural delays, you've got these restrictions making it harder for people to get bail. And then you've got very limited options in terms of places that young people can go to mitigate the court's concern, like secure bail facilities, for example. So what that all means is that young people are just spending longer and longer in prison. The remand time now for young people going through the youth justice courts in the NT now sits at 51 days.
Were there any other particular things that stood out to you during your time in the youth justice court?
Yeah, I think one significant thing I noticed was really what can only be described as a breakdown of the processes involved of assessing young people for mental health and disabilities. So the court can order that young people are assessed for things like cognitive disabilities, learning disabilities, severe mental health, FASD, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And so these reports then really inform the court about what to do with this young person, how they should be sentenced or whether they should be found liable for those offences at all. And so in some circumstances, it was taking 12 months to get these reports done. In the most extreme cases, they weren't getting done at all. And that has some really significant impacts, not just for that young person, but on the ability of the courts to do what they're supposed to do, which is deliver just outcomes for the community. So some really significant issues facing the courts at the moment, Kyle.
Thanks, Ollie.
Thanks.